Hi there. Welcome to my first ever webcast. My name is Ron. I'm from Eindhoven, the Netherlands, where I work and live, and I have been involved with One World Citizens for a few years now, mainly in the background. But a while back, I got a chance to do some proper research into the platform, and the goal was to create some sort of concept around which we could structure the diversity of projects that One World Citizens entails, um, and create a sense of unity within it. And when I was looking at this, I started from the full scope of One World Citizens, where there's a board of directors, there's followers who are mainly like parents and organizations interested in our activities. But the most important leg, I would say, are the participants, which at the time were mainly younger people, um, below 18. At least that's the group I focused on in the research. I realize at, at this time, actually, I think the focus is more on a slightly older group, but I think the same conclusions would apply um, in an effort to search for an interface that we can use to share these projects with each other and with the world. Um, Let me just go through some conclusions that came out of the research, um, which consisted of some uh, open answered interviews and um, questionnaires that I had many participants fill out, or Skype calls in between. So all very qualitative data, but I did find some red threads here and there. Um, this is the overview. The main thing, the core focus of any project within One World Citizens um, is that it's a form of social entrepreneurship. Social meaning that it's bigger than yourself. You're not just doing it for your own profit. And entrepreneurship meaning that it's an organized action. From the interviews, I learned didn't have to a project didn't have to be a company per se or a recurring event. It could also be a one-time thing. Um, it Every one of the projects was created by and for, the platform is created by and for youth. The projects go beyond that age group. One of the examples I'll go into a bit further focuses on elderly, actually. So, but the platform itself is a very young initiative in the broadest sense of the word, and it means it doesn't develop as quickly as possible. But I think it was very good to see that the voice of the target group we want to reach with it is really involved in creating it. And then another core principle I found was that the projects that were being developed within the platform showed a great diversity. Um, so I think this was the core issue that, or the bottleneck that One World Citizens was having at the time, how to organize around a multitude of projects, because I just scheduled it like this. If you compare it to a big initiative like the World Nature Fund, uh, helping animals all over the world to get a better place, they are very closed in a sense that you can only access them from one side as a participant. You never see you're not involved in creating the structure within. It's a clear goal though that they have, and it's easy to sense whether you're in or out. With One World Citizens, it's more what we see on the left, where there are all types of um, goals or problems or opportunities that are uh, being being used as inspiration for projects, and the participants move in between these projects. So you're really also responsible for creating the structure um, of your own project. And in this case, I took elderly animals and bullying, and people move in between on every side, and maybe also in multiple projects at the same time. Those were the biggest things that I think define uh, the the platform. And then what I also got from the interviews were um, the importance of keeping these projects close to the people who are developing them, in the sense that the ones that worked best were the ones that gave local relevance. In the best case scenario, it would help them create their own future. For example, a student in music who plays many instruments, wants to be in an orchestra, and he knows that it's tricky to do this full time. So his project was a research into how to develop an agency that gives all jobs to musicians that they can do in between, and really, yeah, developing a way for himself to do his profession in a way he would like in the future. The minimal game, though, even if this bigger plan doesn't work out, is that it already felt relevant if they could help someone. So immediate impact with in whatever form, whether it's for yourself or helping others. Yeah, was a core thing as well for projects to be to stay alive, let's say. On the other hand, uh, what reverberated well as well was the need for a global potential of the ideas. I felt a resistance against reinventing the wheel, and once an idea is developed and working out well, it should be easy to transfer this idea to another place, to another context, but using the same ingredients or similar ingredients to do a similar thing should be made accessible. Then there was another thing that popped up. Everyone is busy, and even though they might have had some weeks to work a bit harder on a project, after a while other priorities emerged. And because the organization, mainly Monique, is really patient and only asks what you can do and not demanding you do it at a certain time, the platform lacks a sense of urgency. So how do we make sure that how do we create an environment where you feel a sense of urgency, so if you have time, you get back on it. Otherwise, the projects tend to spread over a long amount of time, and you feel less impact of your commitment. Because these people I've interviewed were pretty young, parental supervision was also a thing that needed to be incorporated into the platform. Not in a controlling way, but to make sure everything is safe, that parents don't feel, don't hesitate to have their kid become a social entrepreneur just because they don't trust the source. So we should make sure we keep everything very transparent. Even with adults, I think some kind of supervision where there's some antennas, some people watching what is happening and reaching out to the organization if they feel something is getting out of hand, would be helpful, I think. no one can do it alone. And everyone involved in One World Citizen has an entrepreneurial spirit, and maybe they wouldn't feel if they try it alone, but you wouldn't come to us if you wanted to do things by yourself. I think the core purpose of One World Citizens is to connect people who want to make the world better together. Um, yeah, no one is a superhero and can be everywhere at the same time. So I think this is one of the aspects that really adds core, value to the platform where most value is created. But what we also learned is that if the platform also offers some fun activities like camping or um, having meetings out during school hours, um, since it's very open, everyone can join. Some people joined and then only for the fun stuff. And really committed participants felt like, okay, if you're going to join, you have to do something. So to join is a verb. You got to turn it into action. And the sense of exclusivity is also appreciated. Like, if it feels like some sort of club if not everyone can get in, or you have to work or show something before you're really accepted. And the way I interpreted this was, if you start to help out someone else to make their project, to bring their project to the next level, you're already getting to know the organizational culture in this process, and you don't have the core responsibility, so it's less of a threshold to get involved. And by actually helping someone out and finishing that job, you can prove you're serious. And once you've helped someone realize their project, you can start your own. That was an idea that emerged from this exclusive vibe that I sensed would be welcomed. So these are some points that later on you might recognize or I will refer back to. But mainly when I finished this research, I started to combine it with some theory that I got from my Imagineering studies. It's change management school called Imagineering, and it's really focused on co-creation and how to strengthen an organization by creating the right vocabulary for people to talk about what they do and where they add value. From that studies, I was watching a lot of TED Talks. I've always been watching a lot of TED Talks, and there were a few that I could really connect to the conclusions of this research. And because I think when I presented the results and introduced the concept that I developed from it for the first time, I also showed two talks that really capture some essential parts of it, and I wanted to do the same with you. So I'm gonna skip now or transfer to the first movie, which is by Jonathan Haidt. It's about group selection and superorganisms. After that, I will follow up with Derek Sivers, and it's about co-creational perspective on leadership. So be right back.
I have a question for you. Are you religious? Please raise your hand right now if you think of yourself as a religious person. Okay, let's see. I'd say about 3 or 4%. I had no idea there were so many believers at a TED conference. Okay, here's another question. Do you think of yourself as spiritual in any way, shape, or form? Raise your hand. Okay, that's the majority. My talk today is about the main reason, or one of the main reasons, why most people consider themselves to be spiritual in some way, shape, or form. My talk today is about self-transcendence. It's just a basic fact about being human that sometimes the self seems to just melt away. And when that happens, the feeling is ecstatic. And we reach for metaphors of up and down to explain these feelings. We talk about being uplifted or elevated. Now, it's really hard to think about anything abstract like this without a good concrete metaphor. So here's the metaphor I'm offering today. Think about the mind as being like a house with many rooms, most of which we're very familiar with. But sometimes it's as though a doorway appears from out of nowhere, and it opens onto a staircase. We climb the staircase and experience a state of altered consciousness. In 1902, the great American psychologist William James wrote about the many varieties of religious experience. He collected all kinds of case studies. He quoted the words of all kinds of people who'd had a variety of these experiences. One of the most exciting to me is this young man, Stephen Bradley, had an encounter, he thought, with Jesus in 1820. And here's what Bradley said about it.
I thought I saw the Savior, in human shape, for about 1 second in the room, with arms extended, appearing to say to me, "Come." The next day I rejoiced with trembling. My happiness was so great that I said I wanted to die. This world had no place in my affections. Previous to this time I was very selfish and self-righteous, but now I desired the welfare of all mankind, and could with a feeling heart forgive my worst enemies.
So note how Bradley's petty moralistic self just dies on the way up the staircase. And on this higher level, he becomes loving and forgiving. The world's many religions have found so many ways to help people climb this staircase. Some shut down the self using meditation. Others use psychedelic drugs. This is from a 16th century Aztec scroll showing a man about to eat a psilocybin mushroom and at the same moment get yanked up the staircase by a god. Others use dancing, spinning, and circling to promote self-transcendence. But you don't need a religion to get you through the staircase. Lots of people find self-transcendence in nature. Others overcome their self at raves. But here's the weirdest place of all: war. So many books about war say the same thing, that nothing brings people together like war, and that bringing them together opens up the possibility of extraordinary self-transcendent experiences. I'm going to play for you an excerpt from this book by Glenn Gray. Gray was a soldier in the American Army in World War II, and after the war, he interviewed a lot of other soldiers and wrote about the experience of men in battle. Here's a key passage where he basically describes the staircase.
Many veterans will admit that the experience of communal effort in battle has been the high point of their lives. I passes insensibly into a we. My becomes our. And individual fate loses its central importance. I believe that it is nothing less than the assurance of immortality that makes self-sacrifice at these moments so relatively easy. I may fall, but I do not die. For that which is real in me goes forward and lives on in the comrades for whom I gave up my life.
So what all of these cases have in common is that the self seems to thin out or melt away, and it feels good. It feels really good in a way totally unlike anything we feel in our normal lives. It feels somehow uplifting. This idea that we move up was central in the writing of the great French sociologist Émile Durkheim. Durkheim even called us homo duplex, or two-level man. The lower level he called the level of the profane. Now, profane is the opposite of sacred. It just means ordinary or common. And in our ordinary lives, we exist as individuals. We want to satisfy our individual desires. We pursue our individual goals. But sometimes something happens that triggers a phase change. Individuals unite into a team, a movement, or a nation, which is far more than the sum of its parts. Durkheim called this level the level of the sacred because he believed that the function of religion was to unite people into a group, into a moral community. Durkheim believed that anything that unites us takes on an air of sacredness. And once people circle around some sacred object or value, they'll then work as a team and fight to defend it. Durkheim wrote about a set of intense collective emotions that accomplished this miracle of e pluribus unum, of making a group out of individuals. Think of the collective joy in Britain on the day World War II ended. Think of the collective anger in Tahrir Square, which brought down a dictator. And think of the collective grief in the United States that we all felt, that brought us all together after 9/11. So let me summarize where we are. I'm saying that the capacity for self-transcendence is just a basic part of being human. I'm offering the metaphor of a staircase in the mind. I'm saying we are homo duplex, and this staircase takes us up from the profane level to the level of the sacred. When we climb that staircase, self-interest fades away, we become just much less self-interested, and we feel as though we are better, nobler, and somehow uplifted. So here's the million-dollar question for social scientists like me. Is the staircase a feature of our evolutionary design? Is it a product of natural selection, like our hands? Or is it a bug, a mistake in the system? It's just this religious stuff, it's just something that happens when the wires cross in the brain, and that's, Jill has a stroke and she has this religious experience. It's just a mistake. Well, many scientists who study religion take this view. The new atheists, for example, argue that religion is a set of memes, sort of parasitic memes, that get inside our minds and make us do all kinds of crazy religious stuff, self-destructive stuff like suicide bombing. And after all, how could it ever be good for us to lose ourselves? How could it ever be adaptive for any organism to overcome self-interest? Well, let me show you. In The Descent of Man, Charles Darwin wrote a great deal about the evolution of morality. Where did it come from? Why do we have it? Darwin noted that many of our virtues are of very little use to ourselves, but they're of great use to our groups. He wrote about the scenario in which two tribes of early humans would have come in contact and competition. He said, if the one tribe included a great number of courageous, sympathetic, and faithful members who were always ready to aid and defend each other, this tribe would succeed better and conquer the other. He went on to say that selfish and contentious people will not cohere, and without coherence, nothing can be effected. In other words, Charles Darwin believed in group selection. Now, this idea has been very controversial for the last 40 years, but it's about to make a major comeback this year, especially after E.O. Wilson's book comes out in April, making a very strong case that we and several other species are products of group selection. But really, the way to think about this is as multi-level selection. So look at it this way. You've got competition going on within groups and across groups. So here's a group of guys on a college crew team. Within this team, there's competition. There are guys competing with each other. The slowest rowers, the weakest rowers are going to get cut from the team. And only a few of these guys are going to go on in the sport. Maybe one of them will make it to the Olympics. So within the team, their interests are actually pitted against each other. And sometimes it would be advantageous for one of these guys to try to sabotage the other guys. Maybe he'll badmouth his chief rival to the coach. But while that competition is going on within the boat, this competition is going on across boats. And once you put these guys in a boat competing with another boat, now they've got no choice but to cooperate because they're all in the same boat. They can only win if they all pull together as a team. I mean, these things sound trite, but they are deep evolutionary truths. The main argument against group selection has always been that, well, sure, it would be nice to have a group of cooperators, but as soon as you have a group of cooperators, they're just going to get taken over by free riders, some individuals that are going to exploit the hard work of the others. Let me illustrate this for you. Suppose we've got a group of little organisms. They can be bacteria, they can be hamsters, it doesn't matter what. And let's suppose that this little group here, they evolved to be cooperative. Well, that's great. They graze, they defend each other, they work together, they generate wealth. And as you'll see in the simulation, as they interact, they gain points, as it were, they grow, and when they've doubled in size, you'll see them split, and that's how they reproduce and the population grows. But suppose then that one of them mutates, there's a mutation in the gene, and one of them mutates to follow a selfish strategy. It takes advantage of the others. And so when a green interacts with a blue, you'll see the green gets larger and the blue gets smaller. So here's how things play out. We start with just one green, and as it interacts, it gains wealth or points or food. And in short order, the cooperators are done for. The free riders have taken over. If a group cannot solve the free rider problem, then it cannot reap the benefits of cooperation, and group selection cannot get started. But there are solutions to the free rider problem. It's not that hard a problem. In fact, nature has solved it many, many times, and nature's favorite solution is to put everyone in the same boat. For example, why is it that the mitochondria in every cell has its own DNA, totally separate from the DNA in the nucleus? It's because they used to be separate free-living bacteria, and they came together and became a superorganism. Somehow or other, maybe one swallowed another, we'll never know exactly why, but once they got a membrane around them, they were all in the same membrane, now all the wealth created, the division of labor, all the greatness created by cooperation stays locked inside the membrane, and we've got a superorganism. And now let's rerun the simulation, putting one of these superorganisms into a population of free riders, of defectors, of cheaters, and look what happens. A superorganism can basically take what it wants. It's so big and powerful and efficient that it can take resources from the greens, from the defectors, the cheaters, and pretty soon the whole population is actually composed of these new superorganisms. What I've shown you here is sometimes called a major transition in evolutionary history. Darwin's laws don't change, but now there's a new kind of player on the field, and things begin to look very different. Now, this transition was not a one-time freak of nature that just happened with some bacteria. It happened again about 120 or 140 million years ago when some solitary wasps began creating little simple primitive nests or hives. Once several wasps were all together in the same hive, they had no choice but to cooperate because pretty soon they were locked into competition with other hives. And the most cohesive hives won, just as Darwin said. These early wasps gave rise to the bees and the ants that have covered the world and changed the biosphere. And it happened again, even more spectacularly, in the last 500,000 years, when our own ancestors became cultural creatures. They came together around a hearth or a campfire. They divided labor. They began painting their bodies. They spoke their own dialects, and eventually they worshipped their own gods. Once they were all in the same tribe, they could keep the benefits of cooperation locked inside, and they unlocked the most powerful force ever known on this planet, which is human cooperation, a force for construction and destruction. Of course, human groups are nowhere near as cohesive as beehives. Human groups may look like hives for brief moments, but they tend to then break apart. We're not locked into cooperation the way bees and ants are. In fact, often, as we've seen happen in a lot of the Arab Spring revolts, often those divisions are along religious lines. Nonetheless, when people do come together and put themselves all into the same movement, they can move mountains. Look at the people in these photos I've been showing you. Do you think they're there pursuing their self-interest? Or are they pursuing communal interest, which requires them to lose themselves and become simply a part of a whole? Okay, so that was my talk delivered in the standard TED way. And now I'm going to give the whole talk over again in 3 minutes in a more full spectrum sort of way. We humans have many varieties of religious experience, as William James explained. One of the most common is climbing the secret staircase and losing ourselves. The staircase takes us from the experience of life as profane or ordinary, upwards to the experience of life as sacred or deeply interconnected. We are Homo duplex, as Durkheim explained. And we are Homo duplex because we evolved by multi-level selection, as Darwin explained. I can't be certain that the staircase is an adaptation rather than a bug. But if it is an adaptation, then the implications are profound. If it is an adaptation, then we evolved to be religious. I don't mean that we evolved to join gigantic organized religions. Those things came along too recently. I mean that we evolved to see sacredness all around us and to join with others into teams that circle around sacred objects, people, and ideas. This is why politics is so tribal. Politics is partly profane, it's partly about self-interest, but politics is also about sacredness. It's about joining with others to pursue moral ideals. It's about the eternal struggle between good and evil, and we all believe we're on the good team. And most importantly, if the staircase is real, it explains the persistent undercurrent of dissatisfaction in modern life. Because human beings are, to some extent, hivish creatures like bees. We're bees who busted out of the hive during the Enlightenment. We broke down the old institutions and brought liberty to the oppressed. We unleashed earth-changing creativity and generated vast wealth and comfort. Nowadays, we fly around like individual bees exulting in our freedom. But sometimes we wonder, is this all there is? What should I do with my life? What's missing? What's missing is that we are Homo duplex, but modern secular society was built to satisfy our lower, profane selves. It's really comfortable down here on the lower level. Come, have a seat in my home entertainment center. One great challenge of modern life is to find the staircase amid all the clutter, and then to do something good and noble once you climb to the top. I see this desire in my students at the University of Virginia. They all want to find a cause or calling that they can throw themselves into. They're all searching for their staircase. And that gives me hope, because people are not purely selfish. Most people long to overcome pettiness and become part of something larger. And this explains the extraordinary resonance of this simple metaphor, conjured up nearly 400 years ago. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. Thank you.
Right, that was the first one. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. What this video really confirmed for me is how much strength can be drawn from cooperation. And while I mentioned earlier that no one is a superhero and can be everywhere at all times, I think this idea of superorganisms is a way to address this this bottleneck or this opportunity, in the sense that if you want to connect people who live all over the world, they're going to be in different time zones. So communication is tricky, but we could also use it as an advantage and create superheroes in a sense that it's the core of the shared ID concept, is that if you share one identity with multiple people who live all over the world, and they can imagine Facebook, but having an account that that really tries to change the world, and that can be accessed by different people who access it at different times of the day. So I will be making the world a better place, cleaning my environment around my neighborhood, and then I communicate this through the identity of a shared ID, which someone else logs into at night and is doing the same kind of work in New York, cleaning their streets, and posting it from the same name. Then if you're gonna look up this person, it's gonna seem like this one person is all over the world making it better 24/7. So that's the idea of how a shared ID can create a shared identity, can make someone bigger than themselves, and I think it would also be a nice way if you really want to be a social entrepreneur and look at your activities from as something bigger than yourself. Then it might also be a good idea to let go a bit of your ego, of your own identity, and step into a bigger one. While Facebook is mainly about showcasing the best parts of your complete identity, so showing a little part but very personal, this would be not so personal, and also a small part, but part of something bigger. If you know if you get what I'm trying to say. Maybe I should just go on to the next video and explain further with some explanatory visuals as well. The next video is going to explain how this shared identity could emerge out of an idea, and I will get back to you on that in a few. Thanks.
So ladies and gentlemen, at TED we talk a lot about leadership and how to make a movement. So let's watch a movement happen, start to finish, in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons from it. First, of course you know, a leader needs the guts to stand out and be ridiculed. But what he's doing is so easy to follow. So here's his first follower with a crucial role. He's going to show everyone else how to follow. Now notice that the leader embraces him as an equal. So now it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Now there he is calling to his friends. Now if you notice that the first follower is actually an underestimated form of leadership in itself. It takes guts to stand out like that. The first follower is what transforms a lone nut into a leader. And here comes a second follower. Now it's not a lone nut, it's not two nuts, 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. So a movement must be public. It's important to show not just the leader, but the followers, because you find that new followers emulate the followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, and immediately after, 3 more people. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point. Now we've got a movement. So notice that as more people join in, it's less risky. So those that were sitting on the fence before now have no reason not to. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, but they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. So over the next minute, you'll see all of the those that prefer to stick with the crowd, because eventually they would be ridiculed for not joining in. And that's how you make a movement. But let's recap some lessons from this. So first, if you are the type, like the shirtless dancing guy, that is standing alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals. So it's clearly about the movement, not you. Okay, but we might have missed the real lesson here. The biggest lesson, if you noticed, did you catch it? Is that leadership is over-glorified. That yes, it was the shirtless guy was first, and he'll get all the credit, but it was really the first follower that transformed the lone nut into a leader. So as we're told that we should all be leaders, that would be really ineffective. If you really care about starting a movement, have the courage to follow and show others how to follow. And when you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first one to stand up and join in. And what a perfect place to do that at TED. Thanks.
A bit shorter, straight to the point. Derek really knows how to tell a story. But yeah, you have to agree this is a great way to look at leadership. Not the person who initiates the idea makes it into a movement, but the first one following, and it changes the whole dynamic, the first follower. And this is something I'd also wanted to incorporate into the idea of the concept of shared IDs. And in a way that I already explained before a little bit, that you would start out by helping someone else. So to go into that a little bit further, say you have an idea to change the world, you can create a project and showcase what kind of help you would need to get this done, or what kind of plan you have. But I imagine the first follower thing as a way that would make this idea come to life. So you can pitch your idea, and if someone starts to follow you, then it becomes alive. Then more functionality will emerge in your dashboard, your interface for this project. I think this will really help to create or to keep the momentum of the project going. If you're only one responsible and the only one following yourself, it's hard to keep it going. If someone is actively following you and might be able to help you out with some bottlenecks, then I think it could create a great dynamic. But I'm already further ahead than my presentation, so let's catch up a little bit. Shared ID, this is, I think, the first time you see it spelled out. This is concept that can be explained in 3 different ways that are defining for the platform we're trying to build. The first is a shared ID, so a shared way of how to make the world better for yourself and the people around you. And if you share this ID with someone, then together you can turn it into action, which is the second one, the act of a shared identity. And act in a double way, because if you would create an identity like, let's say, a transformer, where different types of expertise are put into this one entity, it can become stronger and bigger and maybe even active 24/7. So this is something I explained after the first movie. And the third one is shared it, if you pronounce it like that. I got from the research that the platform should also allow for a way to share your ID with another group or another place where the same or similar ingredients can be used to fast forward the development of change happening in that place. So these 3 ways of pronouncing shared ID, I think, also capture the core value or potential of this platform. Another thing that I mentioned from the research was that it needed a sense of urgency, and I think we could do that by creating a sort of Tamagotchi dynamic into the projects. So I imagine this as your projects actually being alive, and you need to feed them with attention. You need to visit your dashboard regularly, or maybe someone else can do it if you share this ID. Of course, you don't have to do it all by yourself, but I think if the attention drifts away, then the idea should also slowly die and fade to the background, which doesn't even necessarily have to be a bad thing. I mean, some ideas are good practice but never lead to anything. But in this way, they won't become clutter in the whole bubble of projects. They will just disappear, and who knows, maybe we can add some functionality where you can revive an idea if you have the right magic spell. Now, if you put effort in it again, you can also bring it back to life, maybe. But the main thing is that this dynamic of the project being able to die, I think, will help to keep it alive, let's say. At least that's how I think it also works for people. If you would be immortal, then nothing is urgent, so I think it's the same type of motivation that helps us out to get the best out of our life. So yeah, then I got some got into some trouble of how to translate these ideas that I just tried to explain into an interface that people could relate to and wouldn't feel too restricted by. If you have to start putting things into boxes, the empty boxes will make you feel like, oh, my idea is not ready yet for the world. And I wanted to create a way where you build up a project in a very organic way, so you can start from different entrance points. But it doesn't have to be complete to already have an impact. At least to already be visible and be able to grow. The metaphor I chose for this is an obvious one if you look at the name of shared identity. It's like a person that is created out of parts from other people, a sort of Frankenstein, which may sound creepy, but if you take it a little bit more abstract, at least for me, it was a way to visualize it for the first time and to test out whether these ideas could work. So the way I imagined it is that most of the time you would start a project with a cause, and this cause is the heart of the idea. Like, what do you want to change in the world? What do you think is the most important thing? And if you articulate that and someone else starts to follow that idea, turning it into a living idea, into a shared idea about what will make the world a better place, then your project could already start to become visible. The more followers you get around this idea, the more body it will get. So I created a cloud in this case around the heart, bubbles. I think it might be a nice way to visualize how big a project is by adding functionality or dynamic like this. If you go one step further and someone has an idea to turn this cause into action, like what would be a way to change this and articulate that, then you would have your right brain. The shared identity would get a brain, and then the creative half. So some kind of innovation that would help out the cause. Of course, we also got the other half, organization, in the left brain. Once you have this idea of how to change it, it needs to get some structure. And some people might find that part especially interesting. They might not have the initiative of starting something or the capacity to think of a new solution, but they are great at organizing chaos, which is definitely something necessary to make a project feasible on the longer term, especially. Another thing could be a voice. If someone starts to spread the idea of that the right brain has thought of and the left brain is organized based on the cause that is a shared idea with a lot of body, then someone starting a Facebook profile with the name of this shared ID as their name and commenting on issues that relate to it and really, literally giving it a voice. I think that could also be an interesting role within this identity. Then, of course, there's muscle. If you want to do a bigger project and you got it all figured out, but you need some volunteers, or muscle could also be finance, I think. And this would muscle, the activity of being muscle, I think, or the part of being muscle, would allow people to help out, to assist in a project without having to dive into it completely and be committed to it on the long term. They can just give it some extra power. And well, if we give this shared ID some legs, then you also got logistics covered. So I can imagine you having this great idea, but you would need to travel back and forth to the location of your project. Then people offering to help you out with the transportation, they can be the legs of this idea. And I think you catch my drift. There's many more organs, body parts that could be translated into project management. So essentially, with this shared ID and giving it a body and actual parts, I've created a first input of how we could visualize this. What kind of metaphor we could use to make it imaginative, but also to once this whole identity is sort of completed, if it has all the parts, then it can also start to have a bigger impact on the world, being taken more seriously as a person, let's say. But this is just speculation. I did test out this concept with a paper prototype with a younger group of participants who were still at the school. So I gave them an example of one of their own ideas, how you could write this out and visualize it using body parts like brains, thoughts, voice, muscles, legs, antennas, the ones for safety, but also call out this identity's strengths and weaknesses, so their talent or their handicaps, but also things that are a little less visible but still relate to the metaphor, like hunger. So what kind of, you're hungry for input in this and this area, or I'm hungry for transportation, so we need some legs. Or so you can use this metaphor as well. And knowledge can also be a body part. Once you start to build up theoretical knowledge around the subject, you can also share it or use it to clone this identity onto a different into a different context. So right next to the shared ID is a little clone. This one has one clone at a different place, and it could be a way to connect to similar projects and to apply the principle of shared it, the third interpretation of the term. So I gave this bear skeleton to these kids to fill out their own project, and I got quite a few great results. Mainly the visualization really spoke to me, but what I also sensed and saw was that they tried to fill out everything. So if there was some body part that they didn't have yet, they would feel like, oh, my idea is not so great because I can't fill out everything. So I mentioned this also before. Yeah, how can you make sure a project can be started from different places, different entry points, and already feel like something that is alive without it being finished? That's why I made the renders I just showed you before, that it would emerge out of nothing. I think that would even be better than having these boxes to be filled out and sometimes left empty, if we're talking about interface. Another nice thing about the three-dimensional representation I now created is that if we would use 3D models, interactive 3D models that would grow along with the project, you can also make it come to life in a more imaginative way than if you just use plain or flat graphics. I'm gonna look up a short movie I made from this guy, and I will be right back with it. Alright, I found it. So from the 3D model I made, you can make an animation of spinning it around, which already makes it like a more three-dimensional object. But what's even more interesting, if we go into the future a little bit, there's also already some software that you can use for free if you have a 3D scan of yourself, and you can also import something you created, like our shared ID here, and then you can animate it by putting a skeleton in it, just dragging some circles towards the model's joints, and then you can make it do all kinds of animations, which I have down here. So it's now breakdancing, and you can go kung fu style. If we take this one step further, you could start to create movies that feature this shared ID, and maybe it only exists virtually, but if it really comes to life like this, by growing and shrinking depending on how many people are involved, but also expanding with more parts if more parts are covered, having a voice in social media. I think like together we can create these superheroes that can actually change the world, and even though your own identity disappears within it, I think it will still, the satisfaction or the gratification you get from being involved in a shared ID that is successful, I think will be just as fulfilling as when your name would be attached. And the nice thing is that you can also take more distance if you feel like it, and get back into it without, you know, your own identity being affected by this. So this was a short overview of the development so far. When I was setting up this webcast and making a presentation, I did feel like, okay, these shared ideas that I created with the human metaphor might be mainly relevant for volunteers, for like projects to change the world, but don't have to be profitable. Because I felt like if you're starting your own company, then you also need some kind of business plan, and then these boxes come back, and it's a more mechanical approach. So what I'm thinking about right now is how to translate the idea of shared ID and the human metaphor into something with transformers. But because, I mean, the purpose of any organization is transformation, and transformers are another great example of how many parts can come together into a bigger machine. And this metaphor also offers possibilities to think about, like, what kind of fuel does my company need? What kind of vehicles do I use for communication, transportation? So, as you can tell, I haven't figured out all the details, but I mainly wanted to share with you my perspective on how we can make this platform come to life, literally and figuratively, by offering an interface that is very organic and grows with you while you explore the opportunities, your local opportunities, and still get a sense of like the global impact that we have together. So I can imagine these identities talking to each other in a way. But please, if you have any ideas of how we can make this more tangible or test it out a bit further, or what you do or don't like about it, please feel free to reach out. We are on Slack now. Otherwise, email also perfect. Thanks for your attention. I know it's been a long story, but yeah, I hope I cleared up a little bit of my thoughts, and let's keep in touch. All right, thanks.